Okay, Mayor Bach, it's great to have you here today. And we thought we had invited you every month on the last Tuesday of each month to come and speak to us before our informal session. And I guess we failed to get that invitation to you, but we want you to know you're welcome to come anytime you want to come, but we definitely want to give you a special invitation to come the last Tuesday of every month and have an hour or two conversation with us, and so we can hear what you're doing and what's going on. So appreciate you coming here today.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem, members of council. Thank you for this opportunity. Steve Bach, Mayor, I want to speak to you today about stormwater. Laura and I had a chance to talk last evening. I know you had a conversation yesterday about this in terms of the budget process, and as you and Mr. President, you and I and President Pro Tem were talking just before this meeting began, we will provide you, and thank you for the idea, by the way, we will provide you on one piece of paper a summary for 2014 of the stormwater plan. Just looking at the budget myself last night, it's hard to add all that up in so many different departments and functions, so we certainly ought to be able to give you and the public one summary sheet that can go in the budget that will show all the sources of funds for stormwater, whether it's general fund, grants, or otherwise, and then all the uses, whether it's for capital improvements or operations and maintenance. And I know, Laura, that's going to take a little bit of time, but and we'll also show for each function that has something to do with stormwater, the funding that function would have and how it would be spent, I think. I hope I'm not overstating a promise there, but that certainly is important. Thank you for that suggestion, because I think that will help clear up a lot of the uncertainty that surrounds stormwater in our budget. And I just want to reiterate something that was communicated last week. I think Councilperson Gabler, you mentioned yesterday that you did see the email that we sent to council, which forwarded the media release that we sent out last week on this. But for those of you that did not see that or were not able to find that in your email, the bottom line is that next year we are proposing to spend about $25 million on stormwater, all in. And so that would be $9 million in new money on the construction, operations, and design of stormwater project. This, along with $7.2 million in pending grant funds. Pending is important. They aren't approved yet, but we are very encouraged that they're possible, and we're pursuing them aggressively. Plus, we have a carryover of $8.8 million in emergency monies that were appropriated this year that we're not able to spend just because it takes so long to get RFPs out and responses back and negotiating contracts and getting design work done. So if you add up those three numbers of $9 million, 7.2, and 8.8, that is the $25 million that is in the budget for next year. And that's, to me, a very important number. We had our public works staff survey other Front Range cities as to what they spend annually. Glad to give you a copy of this if you'd like it. I'll share with you that the city of Aurora budget, their capital budget varies from $8 million to $17 million annually. City of Denver, their capital budget varies from $10 million to $15 million. City of Golden, smaller city, from $800,000 to $1.1 million. Fort Collins, $4 million to $8 million. And so that gives you a range of really from, I'd say, generally speaking, from about $1 million a year to a high of $17 million a year, which is Aurora. So we're going to be spending $25 million next year, subject to these grant receipts. So I think that helps us better see where we stack up, and we need to spend more, because we have delayed for a long time in completing much-needed stormwater projects. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more comfort as to what the budget calls for next year. Also, I just want to say that we continue to work aggressively on stormwater improvements this year. As you know, you thankfully approved additional spending. And now that we have the CH2M Hill stormwater needs assessment in, we are reassessing the priorities. We'll do that with you in partnership and adjust as necessary. We're finding efficiencies and repurposing dollars wherever we can to address this critical need in our city. And attached to that media release last week, Councilmember Gabler, I think he even referenced this, is a spreadsheet which is detailed. It may not give you enough. If not, we can add more to that in terms of how all these dollars add up in terms of where the spending is coming from. And then I want to just visit with you for a minute and follow up to our October 9th stormwater meeting that we held with you and the county commissioners and the regional stormwater task force. And not only for just your reference, but also I would say for the benefit of those fellow citizens who are watching this meeting or will see it taped later, I just want to reiterate my comments for consideration, and I appreciate this opportunity to do that. Well, as you know, a prior city council imposed a stormwater enterprise and a fee on our community years ago. well-meaning, but it didn't resonate well with the public. And subsequently, the voters voted, we think, to discontinue the stormwater enterprise, although going back and looking at that media coverage at that time, that's not totally clear. But in any event, that council elected to honor what they perceived to be the voters' wishes and close down the stormwater enterprise. So we've already had experience with stormwater, and I would just offer again that this time we've got to get this right, our second chance around. And again, I would just say to you that stormwater is just one of the urgent capital needs we have in our city. Councilmember Knight and I have talked about that at some length. I just feel strongly that we must also invest in deteriorating roads and bridges, fire and police infrastructure, and our parks in terms of capital. The Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, the Public Safety Sales Tax, and the Trails and Open Space Sales Taxes help, but not nearly enough. We offered to give you a briefing on that, and you passed, at least as of October 9th. We're happy to come back and do that if that would help you better understand why those revenue sources don't come close to solving all of these capital needs. You know, too often in the past, our leadership has not been able to deal with the mounting backlog of our capital improvement needs. I just submit to you that we've got to deal with it now, and I know you're earnest in that with respect to stormwater. I hope you'll join me as well in dealing with roads and bridges and other capital improvements. And just to summarize, my approach to stormwater is simply this, that we would form a new regional authority with no staff to include the city, the county, and other interested municipalities, enabling the participants to coordinate and collaborate sequencing of projects and joint construction where possible for cost savings and symmetry. I happened to meet yesterday with some of the members of our Pikes Peak Region Mayor's Caucus, just an informal group we pulled together similar to what they did in Denver a few years ago. And I can just tell you that I think if you talk to some of these other mayors, they'll agree we need some way to formally sit down at the table together as entities. IGAs are great, but in this context where there's got to be so much interrelationship between projects that are across jurisdiction lines, it does make sense to have some kind of a formalized approach to how we will work together going forward. My thought is this authority would be overseen by an unpaid board of directors representing the participants with proportional voting based on their share of the county's population. Each participant will bring its own funding, and I know this is a tough subject. I believe that each participant should bring its own funding and spend it in its own jurisdiction. And I commit with your agreement that Colorado Springs will continue to help others with in-kind equipment and staff support, which we did for Manitou after that serious flooding they had. We were up there with personnel and equipment as we should be. I know that they would return that in kind if they could, as would other communities. And so that's really a bond of trust there. And I also think that our city should pay our fair share of projects outside our city limits where we have some joint responsibility. And if you look at the CH2M Hill recent report, there's a star or an asterisk next to a number of the projects that they believe are high priority that indicate that those projects should be shared by multiple jurisdictions. And I believe that when the county's second opinion comes in here by the end of the year, I believe that's right, when they expect that from CH2M Hill, I would expect there would be some similar notation on their report as to what projects would not only involve El Paso County, but potentially us. And so that we could then jointly, I think in just a very few months, develop a list by consensus of what are all the projects that are involving more than one jurisdiction and come to an agreement that will work together. And in our case, Colorado Springs will pay our fair share, even if it's outside the city. That's just the right thing to do. I also think that the city's executive branch can administer this authority. It's similar to what we do with PPRTA on transit, as you know, where PPRTA, through an IGA with our city, delegates to our Public Works Department the administration for transit in the region. So that model already exists. We have the public works systems in place and the senior management in place, which I believe can administer this authority, and I propose that we do that as an in-kind contribution to that new authority so that our neighbors can focus their spending on hard improvements in the ground and not overhead. Obviously, we'd have to fully vet that, see what that cost would be. Is it sustainable within a budget that makes sense? Well, we believe that is very possible. And we obviously could have an opt-out provision if, let's say, the county wants to manage their own project. That'd certainly be their prerogative. But I think you'll find that these other municipalities are very intrigued by the notion of Colorado Springs providing the administration to relieve them of that burden. Manitou Springs cannot afford to hire an engineer. They have 3,000 residents, and so they're not going to be able to hire a full-time stormwater engineer. We've got some great stormwater people already in this city, so we believe we can deliver that to them and others. I do think, and I think you agree with this, that projects design, construction, and maintenance should be outsourced to the private sector, with local vendors receiving preference where practical. This will create much-needed new jobs, and I believe help jumpstart our economy. Colorado Springs can fund our priority capital improvements over at least the next half-decade without asking our fellow citizens for a new tax or fee. And I know this is another point of debate, because I do not have on the table today a permanent solution for funding. I agree to that. What I have is an intermediate solution that I believe can segue into a longer-term solution. And here's how I would do that. First, we will repurpose the $7.9 million that we are spending annually right now on the SCIP bonds, which are the Springs Community Action Improvement Program bonds, soon to be paid off. What I'm proposing is really identical to what this city did in the mid-90s on the SCIP bonds. It's a higher number, I agree. But it's the same concept, which is we're going to accelerate improvements, get people back to work, jumpstart the economy, and pay it off over a period of, in this case, of 2 decades. One reason to think about doing that is that future generations will help pay the cost of these benefits that will accrue to them as well. Well, we would add $7 million to the 7.9 SCIP bond cash flow. We'd add the $7 million from internal efficiencies we are achieving, and we're prepared to show you how to do that. I think we're saying we're spending $9 million in new money this next year, Laura. So to say that we're going to spend $7 million for 5 years certainly seems very achievable to me. So we would issue new bonds without raising taxes and subject to voter approval. I think you agree the voters should approve any borrowing by this city. I certainly feel that way. Providing $175 million available for capital projects. We would spend $35 million a year, and the internal numbers can certainly shift. I think we should discuss that in detail and get everybody's ideas on how best to do this. I just threw out $20 million a year in stormwater. Remember, Denver's spending $17 million a year. Some cities are only spending $1 million to $5 million, but I'm committing we would spend $70 million for capital, not O&M. O&M should be separate, and in addition, $20 million on stormwater, 11.5 plus or minus on roads and bridges. And I would just offer that we're resurfacing 2% of our streets per year in this city. We should be resurfacing 10% according to the experts. So we're only doing 20%. My worry is long after we're all gone, we're still going to be putting Band-Aids on all these various problems we have now. You may have a better idea how to do that. I'm certainly open to listening to you. And if you truly believe that stormwater should be handled separately, I respect that. I would ask for help on how do we then fund these other things that I think have to happen. I hope our mutual legacy will be we set the city on a course to get up with the power curve on our capital improvements in every respect. And I think we can do that together. So $20 million for stormwater, $11.5 million in roads and bridges, plus or minus $2.5 million for public safety. We've got at least 2 fire stations right now that should be torn down. 3 on West Colorado Avenue. I don't know if you've been out there in Old Colorado City. It is not habitable. And the one on Academy and Palmer Park is not much better. And we have other public safety needs. And I think we have to make a commitment to infuse capital into our park system. I'm proposing $1 million a year. It's not much, but it's a start. And I would propose that we would ramp that up as aggressively as we can over these coming years. We simply must invest in capital in our parks. And I know most of you, if not all, agree with that. Separately, I do agree we need to dedicate general fund line items for ongoing maintenance. And I think you have the authority to do that. I haven't checked with the city attorney's office, but it seems to me that we should have a stormwater O&M line, and I propose a roads and bridges O&M line, and by ordinance you can dictate that. And I think I've offered up before that notwithstanding what legally a mayor could do as to whether or not to spend that money, I would certainly at the very least sign an informal MOU, if not a formal agreement with you, that money is going to be set aside. I think it's that critical, and I don't think we should put that at risk for the future. So that's open for discussion. Now lastly, I want to talk about how we would pay for this, and I know there's been a question about incurring debt. You know, our current debt in the city is about $83 million, not counting leases, which are shorter term. When we retire the SCIP bonds, we'll be down to $50 million. That's great. I'd like to see it at 0 if we could, but $50 million here in a couple years will be our current debt. I'm proposing to add another $190 million for this purpose to that, meaning that we would then have $240 million in debt. That compares to a charter limitation of $400 million. So $240 million is well below the charter limit. Now, another way to look at this is, how does that really translate in another way? We'll have $240 million in debt, if you agree to do this. I'm told that our city currently has $1.4 billion in assets, excluding all enterprises. That's an asset to debt ratio of 5.58 to 1, almost 6 to 1. By way of comparison, just for comparison purposes, I'm told that our Colorado Springs Utilities has current debt, and you may already know this, I assume you already know this, of $2,380 million, $2.38 billion, on an asset base of $4 billion. That is a coverage ratio of less than 2 to 1. Now, it's different business, and it ought to be judged differently, but I would just submit that if we're talking about a coverage ratio here of asset to debt of about 6 to 1, compared to utilities of 2 to 1, I hope you could get comfortable that our approach is very conservative and can be readily handled. Our finance subject experts advise us that we can amortize this new bonding with payments of $14.9 million a year within our approximate $246 million general fund budget per year. And even with the additional bonded debt service, and I think this is important, the city's bonded debt service as a percentage of total general fund revenue / expenditures is very reasonable and below the median for cities of our size, according to our external financial advisors and based on data from Moody's. Now, I know that City Auditor Denny Nestor has asked for that detail, and that's forthcoming, and you'll receive a copy of it. Be happy to discuss the detail with you. I think it's a very conservative approach. It's nothing new. We did it with the skip bonds, and I think we can do it again. And I will say this in closing. After the next half decade or sooner, if a growing economy and the attendant growth in sales tax, plus our continuous efficiency initiatives are not sufficient to generate adequate follow-on CIP funding, I will be the first, whether I'm mayor or citizen, to raise my hand and step forward and say to my fellow citizens that it's time for us to come together and consider some sort of new revenue source. But I don't think we can do that in good conscience. I don't think we can ask our fellow citizens to dig deeper into their pockets until we have exhausted all reasonable efforts to deploy our existing cash flows. So I just appreciate you listening to that. I do believe that as a mayor and as our city council, we owe that to our community. And I know you're going to have some town halls. I've got one myself on the 30th. And I would just say to you that that's certainly your prerogative. I would hope we could have more of a dialogue, really, an in-depth discussion with the county commissioners and the task force and bat all this around. And I think we can do it. You know, it can't take more than a couple of weeks, I wouldn't think. I'm available to do that. And just
Great.
Thank you for considering this alternative.
Great. Councilmember Snyder, we'll just have a little dialogue here.
Yeah, I didn't copy everything that you said, Mayor, but I think if I had a copy of the joint stormwater resolution that was passed by this body and the county commissioners, it has an awful lot of what you suggested there. So that I think that dialogue's been going at least among this body and the county commissioners. We certainly welcome yours. We certainly do. We're having our first Regional Stormwater Task Force open house this Thursday night, 5:30, at the, I forget the name of the utility place up there.
Mesa.
That's
Mesa Treatment Plant, yeah.
Mesa Road Treatment, sure.
And it would be great if we could get a copy of your comments there so we can,
Sure.
you know, educate the people that are there. But a lot of what you said has already been put into motion, and I'm really optimistic.
Thank you, Val. And Councilmember Snyder, excuse me, I know you've worked awfully hard on this, along with other council members. And you know, why did I wait until this recently to bring this forward? Honestly, I thought, based on the increased estimate of the total cost that we all received, it went from $500 million to $687 million, that we had to get a second opinion. It took longer than I expected, as I guess things always do, but it did validate that we have a real problem here. There's no question about it, and we've got to deal with it. And so I think it comes down to a couple things, probably governance and then funding. I'm just not able to support any kind of a tax increase or a fee when I know, see, I'm here all day. You don't have that advantage. I'm with the finance people. And well, you may be here all day. I'm here on company time. You're here on comp time. Excuse me. I didn't mean to infer otherwise. But, you know, so I do think there are a couple things here. One is we want to succeed, all of us, and we've already had one pushback from the public on that fee. And if we could get through a period of a few years here and get a lot done on stormwater, roads, and bridges, and public safety and parks, and demonstrate to the community that we are good stewards of the money we have, and really show that we can get a lot done, And if that's not enough, then I think people would be more willing to take a look at digging deeper in their pockets. So we may not agree on that, but I do thank you very much. I know how hard you're working on this. Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise,
Other responses? Well, yeah, I'd just like to respond to a couple things. I really appreciate you coming today. We had seen an immediate need for $2 million that we wanted to take out of a supplemental budget for this year, and yesterday Laura said that you were thinking about 2.5 million to be able to do a supplemental, and so I think that's a real positive coming together and working for immediate needs and situations that exist. And I really think it's really important in the budget if we can, whether it's a actual department or a virtual department, where we come together and put down stormwater department spending and list all the items that are available to the public to see and for us to see, because many times in the budget, we only get 3 line items per budget per department, and it's really hard for us to know where all that money is. And when we originally looked at it, I could find about 155,000, and I couldn't find all the rest. So I think that will really help us in our work if we can see that 25 million. I think that'll really make a big difference for us. We haven't committed to a tax or a fee as far as where we're going. We are going to go on these town hall meetings and let people talk to us, and you could be very well right that there is no interest at all for that right now in this city, and we're going to listen to the constituents and make sure that we don't do something that isn't in step with what is necessary. And if we can do this without doing any kind of tax or fee increase, that's where we'd like to be also. So if we can continue to dedicate more and more of the fund, O&M and capital construction out of the budgets and get that accomplished, I think that would be great. As far as an authority or what organization we look at, I think we're, as Councilmember Snyder said, we're really close on a lot of these ideas on how to manage it and how to come together. I think one of the things that we really need to look at is the entire watershed, all the way from through El Paso County down to Pueblo, and make sure that, like when we went down and talked to the people in Pueblo, that we're being responsible for our aspect of the watershed as it goes down through to Pueblo County, and making sure that we take care of them. I know they're concerned about how much we spend. So we'd love to sit down with you and the county and with the task force and have joint meetings, and you're always welcome to come. And I think we've found a way to have the city attorney attend those meetings so we can get some input from them on how we're doing on the task force. But I'd be willing to try and schedule something in the next 30 days or so for us, all 3 of us, to sit down and just look at all the different options that are available and have an open discussion about that. We are very open to that and would appreciate your input and the open discussion that we can have around that. So we're really thankful that we're coming together on this issue. I think it's going to be a big issue for the city and for the county and for Pueblo, and I think we're going to make a lot of progress. So we're optimistic that we're going to get this done. So thank you very much.
You bet. Well, thank you, sir. And I hope you'll invite all the mayors of the outlying municipalities to that same meeting, because their voices should be heard. I've got a great dialogue with Travis Easton of Monument and Mark Snyder of Manitou and others. And obviously, they both impact us as we impact Fountain, Whitefield security in the county. And so I think having everybody at the table at the same time would be great. On the budget, I thought we were giving you the same format we did last year. Last year, I thought it went pretty smoothly, although you are, to your credit, much more, I think, interested in depth. I think I saw an email this morning that had, for a number of departments, a lot more detail that's actually just in draft stage. So you got to have information that enables you to make decisions. And I would just say we're going to keep trying to get better at this. Obviously, going forward, there will be a summary sheet on stormwater. It's not a big deal. We ought to be able to do that, to put in one place, here are all the ways we're going to get the money for it. Here's how we're going to spend it. Capital versus O&M. Here's the department that's going to do that. And so that's fair. And I've just cautioned, as Laura did yesterday, I hope you don't get to the point where you think you have to establish an actual department. I think that could create a lot of problems from an accounting point of view. And I'm concerned about growing the size of government. But I do agree, we got to have data that is not only accurate, but is readily available and summarizes the whole picture. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll instruct our chief of staff, or whatever we call her, to get with yours, and we'll get this meeting set up in the next month and get a chance to sit down and talk to you. So thanks a lot for coming
Thank you
today.
all.
You're always welcome.